when you're talking about cars are like super attuned to differences between cars. They're going to point out issues really quickly, right? They're an extreme user, right? Because they're so attuned to differences in cars. And do you guys know who this is? Top Gear fans, yeah, Jeremy Clarkson. And what does Jeremy Clarkson do? Crap on every type of car company. But you know, Porsche and Ferrari and everybody else, they're going to be smart about that because they'll give him maybe a prototype car before they release it to the public, and he's going to pick out issues way before your average Joe will, right? And that's a good thing for you as a designer. You can catch flaws early. So we've done the same thing, like in my work. So this is a picture of our wheelchair, and we'll do a class on this about how this wheelchair was made. But anyway, this is a picture of a guy in Tanzania. Like, this guy would be playing linebacker in the NFL if he had use of his legs. He's jacked. And this guy used to ride like 2 or 3 miles to and from work every day on rough dirt roads. He is an extreme and lead user for off-road wheelchairs. And so the feedback he gave to us was really valuable. He spotted issues that other people wouldn't have spotted. Okay, another point is try to think about latent needs. And a great example here that I love is Henry Ford, who said, you know, if I asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses, right? You get this, I get this all the time. People say, you know, I want, let's take for example a farmer. They say like, oh, I need grid electricity in order to pump water to irrigate my land. Well, that's not necessarily true. What they need is water to irrigate their land. How they get it could come through a variety of mechanisms. You know, it could be canals, it could be solar power, it could be diesel, whatever. So you have to, when you talk to users, and you'll find this when you talk to your partner companies as well, they may express requirements in terms of solutions, and you have to read the latent needs behind those statements, right? And figure out what is the actual problem that people are thinking about, and what would people maybe want that they don't even know they want yet. And an example of somebody who knew what people wanted before they knew it was Steve Jobs, right? He was really good at this. Like, if you had described an iPad to me 10 years ago, I'd be like, okay, that sounds hokey, but like, you know, everybody's bought one. So yeah, he understood latent needs, what people actually wanted, what people valued before they could maybe express it. Okay, another point I want to really stress on you guys is just don't impose false design constraints, right? And some of them that are really common for design for developing countries is like, it has to be low cost. Well, why? Who's buying it? You know, if you're selling Ferraris in China, it doesn't have to be low cost. It has to be made from local materials. No, that's not necessarily true. It all depends on like availability and robustness, or you know, a lot of different factors. It has to be given away for free. This is a big stigma, I think, for developing world technologies, that people associate it with charity. That's not true at all. It has to be of poorer quality than what maybe you or I want in a wealthier market. You know, and that's totally not true. You know, I think one of the big points I wanted to make, and I'll make in the next lecture too, is that we design high performance, low cost solutions for these markets. They can disrupt global markets, right? If we can beat the performance or match it of what we have here, but for a much lower price. So all this is bogus necessarily. You know, some of it is true sometimes, but you have to see why. And the kind of counterexample here that I love that you know, throws all these out the window is this is the Ferrari 458 China edition. It was designed for China, right? It's got dragons on the hood, you know, it's got all these cool like Chinese, like, I don't know, prompts and cultural things in it. And I don't have a big one, but I have just a little one. But you can pass this around and see some of the design cues on this, which are kind of cool. But you know, none of that's true, and they tailored this really high value, expensive product for an emerging market. So the flip side of this is I think you can identify what I like to call design freedoms, which are elements inherent to the environment where you're designing that you can actually exploit to your advantage, right? So one might be low cost labor. Right? You might choose to do a more labor-intensive process if you're manufacturing in Vietnam or India rather than you would in the US in order to make a cheaper solution. Subsidies, right? We use this all over the place. And in the next lecture, I'm going to give you a story of why this is so important sometimes in these markets. Like, working with wheelchairs, always important. Working with agriculture, always important. But you can leverage those to your advantage, potentially. I like to think about the entire economic pyramid. I think the bottom of the pyramid is very important, and there's people in really rough shape at that point. But emerging markets represent the whole economic pyramid, and there's fortunes to be made there. So think about that whole pyramid. Sometimes there are available parts and materials that you can really exploit. And an example that I'm going to talk about more in depth, I think it's next week, is our wheelchair, where all the moving parts are bike parts. And as a result, our chair is repairable anywhere. And it's been one of the best design features of the whole thing because it never breaks, right? And that's an issue with a lot of developing world wheelchairs. It breaks in the village, can't use it anymore. And you want to think about how the environment, and you can think of this very physically as the natural environment may be very different in these countries than it may be here. So for example, solar power probably makes a lot more sense in India than Boston, right? Because you have a higher solar radiance. And so, exploit that. Okay, what time is it? Yeah, this is a good stopping point. I'm going to stop right here, and we'll talk about this. That's kind of your prep for design process, and next time I'm going to talk about the design process we're going to use in this class, which is kind of a hybrid of all of them. Please fill out those sheets, bring them back, drop them at my office by tomorrow morning, and we're going to do a draft and assemble teams, give you guys the best picks we can, and also please bring back the